She believed he was her enemy, raised to fear his kind since childhood. But one injured night on the American frontier forced her to face the truth. What began as fear turned into a decision that changed two lives forever. Stay till the end to witness how one meeting rewrote destiny. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more unforgettable tales. In the late 19th century, the American frontier was a land shaped by fear, survival, and unspoken wounds. An Apache woman named Ayanna rode alone through the dry plains, her body tired and her spirit guarded. From childhood, she had learned that trust was dangerous and mercy was rare. Every distant ranch represented threat, every stranger an enemy. Her people had suffered too much to believe otherwise. That evening, as the sky burned orange and her horse stumbled from exhaustion, Ayanna knew she was vulnerable. Stopping meant danger, but continuing meant certain collapse. Fate gave her no choice. When the horse finally fell near a small ranch at the edge of the valley, Ayanna slid to the ground, injured and disoriented. Pain spread through her leg, and fear tightened her breath. Before she could disappear into the brush, footsteps approached. A man emerged tall, weathered, dressed like a rancher, a rifle resting against his shoulder. Everything Ayanna had been taught screamed at her to run or fight. Her hand moved instinctively toward her blade. This was the enemy she had feared all her life. She expected cruelty, commands, or violence. Instead, the man stopped several steps away and raised his empty hand. Ethan had lived on that land for years, long enough to understand silence and suffering. He recognized fear in Ayanna's eyes because he had seen it before on battlefields, in broken towns, and in his own reflection after loss. Slowly, he lowered his rifle and spoke in a calm, measured voice. He offered water, then stepped back to give her space. His movements were careful, respectful, almost hesitant. Ayanna did not understand his words fully, but she understood tone. For the first time that night, her grip loosened slightly. Against every instinct, she allowed herself to stay. The night passed quietly, broken only by the wind and distant animals. Ethan built a small fire and left food nearby, never forcing conversation. Ayanna remained alert, barely sleeping, prepared to escape if danger came. Yet no harm followed. At dawn, Ethan returned with cloth and clean water, tending her wound with surprising care. His actions confused her more than violence would have. There was no demand, no expectation, just patience. As hours passed, Ayanna felt her fears slowly shift into uncertainty. She had prepared for cruelty, not kindness, and that unsettled her deeply. Days followed in uneasy calm. Ayanna stayed hidden near the ranch, healing slowly. Ethan respected her distance, speaking only when necessary. Through gestures
Ethan had
and
lost
broken
family
language,
during
fragments
violent
of their
rage
hatred
and
had taken much
wars.
from him, but it had also exhausted him. Ayanna listened, guarded but curious. She realized pain was not owned by one side alone. Each sunrise softened her certainty. The enemy she had imagined all her life did not match the man before her. One afternoon, distant riders appeared on the horizon. U.S. soldiers searching the area. Ayanna recognized the danger instantly. Panic returned, sharp and immediate. Capture could mean imprisonment or worse. She prepared to flee, despite her injury. Ethan understood the situation without words. In that moment, he faced a choice that would define him. He could step aside and remain safe, or act and risk everything. Without hesitation, he led Ayanna to a hidden shelter behind the hills and covered her tracks. When the soldiers arrived, he stood firm and sent them away. The risk Ethan took was real. Helping her could cost him his land, his freedom, even his life. As the soldiers disappeared, Ayanna watched from hiding, her understanding of the world breaking apart. This was not weakness or fear, it was a decision rooted in humanity. She realized that enemies are shaped by stories told too long without question. That day, she saw a man judged not by his past, but by his actions. The realization stayed with her, heavier than any wound she carried. As her strength returned, Ayana knew she could not remain. Her people needed her, and her journey was unfinished. When she prepared to leave, there were no dramatic speeches. Ethan gave her supplies and stepped back, allowing her dignity. Ayana met his eyes, offering a quiet gesture of gratitude from her culture, simple, sincere, and final. Words were unnecessary. Both understood that this meeting was not meant to last forever, but its impact would. Ayana rode away with a changed heart. The land ahead was still dangerous, still uncertain, but it no longer looked the same. She carried a truth she had never known, that compassion could exist where hatred once lived. That survival did not always require hardness. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that peace was possible, even if fragile. The past would not disappear, but the future could be shaped differently. Years later, the memory of that ranch remained clear in her mind. It reminded her that history is built not only by wars and borders, but by quiet moments of courage. Ethan returned to his work, never seeking recognition, never speaking of that choice. Yet his decision lived on through Ayana's changed path. One meeting, born from fear, became a turning point that proved humanity can rise above division. This story is not about forgetting pain or denying history. It is about recognizing that change begins with a single choice. In a land divided by fear, one act of understanding reshaped two lives forever. Reason we learn what humanity truly means. The person we are taught to fear most becomes. Ayana was no longer the same woman who had once ridden in fear. When she finally returned to her people, she carried more than survival with her. She spoke little about the rancher, but her actions reflected a shift. She urged caution instead of hatred, awareness instead of blind revenge. Some listened, others resisted, shaped by years of loss. Ayana understood them. Pain does not fade easily. Yet she had seen proof that the world was not divided as simply as enemy and ally. That understanding became her quiet strength. Life on the frontier grew harsher as expansion increased. Conflicts intensified, and trust became rarer. Ayana often thought of Ethan during moments of danger, recalling his calm voice and steady hands. She realized that courage was not always loud or violent. Sometimes it was the choice to protect when fear demanded distance. That lesson guided her decisions. She helped families escape danger, negotiated when possible, and avoided bloodshed when it served no purpose. Though the world remained unforgiving, Ayana learned that survival could coexist with compassion, even in the most brutal times. Ethan's life also moved forward, though the memory of that meeting never left him. He continued working his land, aware that the frontier rewarded silence more than kindness. He never spoke of the Apache woman he helped, knowing such truth could invite trouble. Still, his outlook shifted. He treated travelers with patience, refused to join violent pursuits, and questioned the stories told too easily about enemies. The frontier respected strength, but Ethan chose restraint. It was not weakness. It was resolve shaped by one moment that reminded him why humanity mattered more than fear. Years later, fate tested that resolve again. A violent conflict erupted near the region, drawing soldiers and settlers into chaos. Smoke rose across the plains, and fear returned to the land like an old wound reopened. Ethan found himself caught between orders and conscience. When innocent families were threatened, he acted, guiding them to safety, offering shelter, refusing to participate in cruelty. Word spread quietly of a rancher who stood apart from violence. Some called him foolish. Others followed his example. Change did not arrive loudly, but it arrived nonetheless. Ayana heard whispers of a rancher who protected the helpless. She knew, without certainty but with conviction that it was him. The thought stayed with her during long nights by the fire. She understood then that their meeting had not been an isolated event. Its impact had traveled outward, shaping choices beyond what either of them could see. She realized that the smallest moments often carry the greatest consequences. In a world driven by force, quiet decisions were rewriting the future in subtle but lasting ways. When circumstances finally allowed the past, Ayanna returned did not approach the ranch openly. Instead, knowing the risk left a sign of gratitude from her people near the land, a symbol of peace rarely given. Ethan found it days later and understood immediately. He stood there for a long time, looking across the land they both had survived. No words were exchanged, yet everything was said. The frontier moved forward, shaped by railroads, towns, and laws, but the deeper battle remained unchanged. Fear still divided people, and history continued to repeat itself. Yet within that cycle, stories like theirs existed, unrecorded, unseen, but real. They proved that humanity could interrupt hatred, even briefly. That interruption mattered. It reminded future generations that identity does not determine character, and that history is shaped not only by power, but by principle. Ayanna became a voice of balance among her people, respected not for force, but for wisdom earned through experience. Ethan aged quietly, his land becoming a place known for safety rather than conflict. Neither sought recognition. They understood that some acts are meant to exist without reward. Their lives never crossed again, yet their choices remained, connected by a shared moment that altered their paths forever. In the end, this story is not about a rancher or an Apache woman alone. It is about the power of perception and the courage required to challenge it. It is about recognizing humanity where fear once stood. One meeting, shaped by restraint and respect, proved that even in divided times, unity is possible. And sometimes, the greatest change begins when we choose not to become the enemy we were taught to fear.